Today, on Storm of Blood, we'll be comparing the match play battle plans from General's Handbook 2018 to General's Handbook 2019, and why Khorne has a much easier day scoring on these battle plans. As I mentioned in my last video, and of course in the intro, I have said that in General's Handbook 2019, I believe Khorne is a lot more capable of scoring on the objectives versus General's Handbook 2018. Now, today is going to be an interesting video because there's no script, and this is going to be primarily a discussion video. So if you're the type that likes to put videos on in the background and paint models or work on something else, today's your day. For comparison's sake, I won't have both books side by side in the video because that's a little inconvenient to hold and also talk. So instead, since I bought the Warlords edition for 2019, I will be using the War Scroll cards of the battle plans instead. This video is only going to cover the 12 battle plans that are specific to the General's Handbook and not the 6 that are found in the core rulebook. That makes this easier for comparison since most of the time you'll be using the battle plans in General's Handbook if you're in an event. So of course, each event is different. So let's get started. The first battle plan we'll be looking at is Knife to the Heart. The primary win condition is the same, where if any player controls both objectives, they immediately win the game starting from the third battle round. However, what has changed significantly is the deployment zones and the placement of the objectives. In 2018, they were off the corner 20 inches in within the 2x2 square in player A's territory or player B's territory. Instead, now in 2019, they are 24 inches in, 12 inches up. And that is relatively the same, but not really, since that it shifts over to the right a little bit. But this is one of the battle plans that we normally don't like using since it's such a harsh win condition that deep striking armies can very easily achieve. The next battle plan we're looking at is Total Conquest. This one has significantly changed. The most obvious thing, of course, is the rather ridiculous territories that were in the 2018 version, where it is now a simple triangle measuring from corner to 24 inches in. It's rather, how shall I say this, unwieldy to measure this out because for some reason GW likes doing these things, but the placement for the objectives is much simpler. They're 12 inches up, 18 inches in across all four, versus this rather interesting gap where there's a 3-inch here, and then you have to measure 9 inches out, so that's actually 12 inches in, and then you have to measure this out. It's, yeah, no, this one was never played in my local meta because of the ridiculousness of these measurements. The victory point conditions are the same. Score 1 if you control it, and score another one if you gain control of an objective that your opponent has had before. This one has been seeing play now since it's much easier to set up, and it's quite balanced. For Khorne players, what's interesting to note is the territory sizes have changed in 2019, and this is significant for the Skull Altar. There's going to be a lot less space for your army and the Skull Altar, so you really need to be aware of where you're placing the altar. You don't want to place it in a spot where it blocks yourself, and the only way to do that is, of course, with play experience. The next battle plan we're looking at is Duality of Death. This one has also significantly changed in terms of its territories. Instead of it having to measure 12 inches in, and in from the center, you're now taking up 24 inches in, 12 inches up on 2x2 squares. And how do I know these measurements? Because look, start from here. This is a long table edge, short table edge, and you're going up to the notch on the deployment map. Again, why does GW not actually flat out write the measurements? They do here, but why are you measuring this? Why not just measure the territory itself? It is what it is. And in regards to scoring for this battle plan, in the 2018 version, we had only heroes or behemoths could control the objectives. Now, in the 2019 version, it's heroes or battle line units. This is a huge deal because we can send Blood Reavers out to grab these objectives. We can summon in battle line units through blood letters, especially for 2 blood tithes, we can bring in 5 blood letters, and that's quite a powerful thing to do late game. Or if you have if you're taking blood sacrifice as a blood blessing, you can just start bringing out the blood letters quickly. And since they only cost 2 blood tithe and there's 5 blood letters die very easily. So you're getting 1 blood tithe back very quickly, so you only have a net loss of 1 blood tithe. Keep that in mind. And of course the controlling condition remains the same, where you have to be within 3 inches while controlling that objective, and the first one that gets there grabs it. If you kill it in melee, you immediately grab it. And the same victory point conditions for scoring. And that is that. Again, big thing here is the territories, especially with the Skull Altar, especially with this. You're gonna really have a difficult time deploying this army, especially if you're running the ones that love sticking together and castling up from all the auras. So, Diamonds of Blood or Pilgrims lists, they can get around this one. Otherwise, you're gonna have a bad day. The next battle plan we'll be looking at is Battle for the Pass. This one was a highly played one in my local meta since it's very easy to set up. Just long table edges for the territories, deploying 12 inches away, so it's just a 24-inch up from the long end, and objectives were nicely placed, and scoring was very simple. Now in the 2019 version, we're doing these arrowheads, also relatively easy to do since this is where the 2x2 squares meet. That's where you start up at, so they're 24 inches apart, and then you're going to the diagonals. The diagonals will be the corners of that person's table side. The objectives are in the same spot as last year, and the scoring is the same. Again, Skull Altar. Be very careful if you want to deploy this altar at the very tip of the arrowhead, because that's premium space. Depending on the terrain that is on the table, you may or may not want to have it directly behind the objective or around it, but I really recommend don't put it directly at the tip of your territory. The next battle plan we'll be looking at is Scorched Earth. 2018 version, you had 3 objectives per player territory, and your territories were divided like so. Well, and deploying 9 inches away from territories. In the 2019 version, we get an extra objective in a player territory, and the territories shift from this to this. And they're placed in each section here. Deployment is still the same, 9 inches away from enemy territory, and scoring is the same. Another good one to play. The next battle plan we'll be looking at is Total Commitment. The twist here is the same as last year, where you cannot set up any units into reserve, and that really does not affect Khorne because we don't have reserves. Except if you're doing something crazy that I don't know about, but I'm fairly confident in saying that Khorne does not play with reserve units. We summon stuff in, that's not reserves. The significant change here is, well, this entire thing has changed in terms of territory and objective placements. So we had this standard territory setup to going triangle corner to corner, and you are deploying 9 inches away from enemy territory. The objectives are placed 6 inches up, 30 inches in, or 24 inches in, 24 inches up, 6 inches in, and that is like so. Notice that compared to 2018 the objectives were much farther away compared to this. This is definitely a much smaller gap. So these are easier to control and hang on to. The victory point conditions are the same as last year. So this is another good one to play on. Unless, of course, your opponent does not like it if they play deep strike heavy armies such as Stormcast Eternals. The next battle plan we'll be looking at is focal points. The scoring is the same as last year. If you control the opposing objectives, you get 3 victory points. If you control the center, you score 2. If you control any others following no other conditions, you score 1. We have territories completely changed. We shifted from being corners to being directly half of the table. And the objectives have shifted from this cross or plus, whatever, however you want to look at it, to an X formation. A little interesting to see, just changing things up. This is definitely one of my favorite battle plans to play. Nice and simple, keeps things interesting. Here we have the better part of Valor. This one is also significantly changed in terms of objective placement and territories. Victory point scoring conditions are the same as last year, of course. And let's look at the objective placements. Notice in last year, we have 24 inches spacing from each objective. Now we have this year 18 inches in between. However, the objectives are farther away from enemy ones. Notice here, this is an 18 inch to the middle line and then 18 inches from that. So there's a 36 inch gap between your middle objective and your opponent's middle objective. So you're going to be scoring longer. Of course, unless of course there is something faster out there. Then we have the battle plan shifting objectives. This one has changed significantly as well. The territories are smaller compared to last year, and the objectives are now running along this middle line of the table. Victory point scoring conditions are the same, and of course the primary and secondary objective check is also the same. I do have to stress again, this small territory that we have. It's only 12 inches up from the long table edge. So again, be very mindful of how you place your skull altar and also terrain. Don't forget that with the General's Handbook 2019 FAQ, there was an errata change for the placement of faction terrain. It's no longer 6 inches away from other terrain pieces, it's now 3, so it's much easier to deploy the skull altar. Also, really nice objective to, battle plan to play. Simple setup as well. And now we're finally in the meat and potatoes of this video. Places of Arcane Power and the Relocation Orb. These two were by far the battle plans I did not like playing at all. I dreaded having them come up, to the point where I mostly re-rolled them because, well, I think you all know my pain. So let's start with Places of Arcane Power first. So with Places of Arcane Power, the objective placements and the territories are the same. What makes this finally playable for Khorne is the change from hero with an artifact of power or friendly wizard. Those two were the only ones that were capable of holding the objectives in the 2018 version. In the 2019 version, it now checks only for friendly heroes. That's it. Nothing else. This is incredible for us because we do have heroes that will sit in the back. Bloodsecrators, for example. Bloodstokers, for example. Of course, assuming that they have no one else to whip. Or, here's some secret tech here. Summoning Bloodmasters. Again, there are only 2 blood types, just like 5 bloodletters. But they are a perfect hero to have all the way back here. Just summon them in, send them over, and they will hold that objective for you. Since most of our heroes are fighty heroes, of course not looking at Slaughter Priests or Bloodstokers, although with enough attacks they can do stuff against weaker targets. But summoning in Bloodmasters is an incredible thing to do to have these objectives. I hated this one so much in 2018 that it forced list building that for example, the most commonly taken artifact that I used, the Talisman of Burning Blood, was it had such a short range that if I had that hero with that artifact back here, there was just so much at the table he was not affecting to provide that bonus of +1 run and charge. But now, since it's only a hero, thank your Blood Masters, people, because he's going to be used a lot in this one. And then finally, we have probably the most hated battle plan of 2018, the Relocation Orb. Look at this janky territory. Look at this janky map for the orb. Compared to 2019, much simpler territory, 24 inches up to your corner, and there is only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 possible places that the orb could go, and it no longer relocates on a roll of a 6 or a 1. It moves only once. So this is way more predictable, far easier to play. In fact, I am totally willing to play this on a casual night or something like that, versus this crazy bouncing around that is just absolutely ludicrous and don't know how this made playtesting. So this is much easier to play around, and gotta give you a thumbs up, GW, for seeing your mistakes and correcting them. Bravo. So now that we've compared the battle plans from General's Handbook 2018 to General's Handbook 2019, there is, of course, some list building things that you have to consider. The battle plans in this book force your army to now spread out more so than usual. So using lists that like to castle on itself, you really don't want to do. You need things that are either capable of being self-sufficient or have no conditional requirements. I'm mainly speaking of battalions here. So things like Skulltake, Redheadsmen, Bloodforged, where you need to, or Charno Host, where you need to be a certain distance from a hero, you probably don't want to look at unless you know a way around it and build some redundancy in there. For example, if you have multiple Wrathmonger units in your list where you're capable of spreading out the +1 attack 8-inch aura from the unit, that's one way of going about it. Or taking multiple sources of extra attacks. So like with a Blood Mad Warband, for example, love this Mortal Battalion. It's by far my favorite, where it's one condition: all units in that battalion that have charged get +1 attack. It's on top of everything else that's in the army. So Stacks Bloodsecrators, Sparring Deathbringer, who are both inside the battalion, Wrathmongers. So if you have everything right, which is kind of hard to do, that unit in the battalion will have +4 attacks. So imagine Skull Reapers, 8 attack space. Pretty sweet. Other thing you can consider is with Fleshhounds. Fleshhounds are one of our best summoning units since they cost only 3 Blood Tithe. Quite simple to do. And they move 8 inches. They can reroll their own charges. They require no support since they have 4 attack space. But it's only hitting on 3s, winning on 4s, no random 1 damage. You still have to consider that they're cheap for what they do and they bring a lot of utility. They're great little units to go out and grab objectives. I start my demon heavy list with 2 of them because they do things that the rest of the list can't do. And in regards to things like, places of arcane power, summoning in Blood Masters is a great idea. Like, it's probably one of the best things you can do to stay ahead of the game. Now, there are other changes in General's Handbook 2019 to be aware of, and that is the new Triumph features. There's 3 others. They're all quite good now, and again, these are the cards from the Warlords edition. I got these so that way I can remember the fact that I have them. And there's also the second terrain feature table. This is also quite a big deal, and it actually affects how you deploy and affects who takes what territory, especially when there's one like the commanding terrain feature, where if you have your general within a certain distance, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, I think it's within 6 inches, 3 inches sounds about right. And if you have your general within 3 inches there and there's no enemy general, you get a command point and start a hero phase, which is really a big deal since command points are so hard to get nowadays. Unless, of course, you're going around it. If your Gloomspite gets, for example, you have command points for days and you have no idea what to do with them. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind with list building besides how much axe to face can you apply. And that's something I've been learning myself, where I used to be building heavily offensive lists. For example, I took a Gore Pilgrims list that built around 6 Mighty Skull Crushers, and it was a very castle heavy list since I have Wrathmongers that want to affect stuff, and of course there's still the Blood Secretor. Even though it's a 24-inch range, I still had stuff leaving this range because they had to go affect certain parts of the table. Something to really keep in mind, and get a lot of test games in, play more. In fact, that's something all of us can do, which is just play more games. Stop. I know this is kind of ironic considering the format of what I'm saying here, and also on the platform, but participating in internet discussions does not really help your game. What helps your game is being on the table, is rolling those dice, and of course interacting with your opponent and making stories of your own. Until next time in Storm of Blood, happy wargaming, and I'll see you in the next one.